When you hear the term school fad, what sort of things come to your mind? No, I'm not talking about these modern day TikTok trends these kids have been doing like devious licks and other extracurriculars. We're instead talking about the classics. When kids would get their hands onto something as simple and innocent as some animal-shaped rubber bands and turn them into their entire personality and life's pursuit. And of course, the more rampant that these fads become in the classroom, the more likely they are to get banned one way or another. From card-based gambling rings to unintentional wrist slittings, today we are counting down 10 of our favorite fads that got banned from school. Starting with Number 10. Slap bracelets. Originally invented by a teacher in 1983, slap bracelets were most popular throughout the 80s and 90s, although they are still worn today and you can buy them from a variety of manufacturers. This set of 48 Christmas-themed ones was the cheapest I could find. They are seemingly harmless little things. You receive the bracelets flat like this. One side is concave, the other convex. When you slap the convex side of the band against your wrist, it quickly curls up around it, nice and snug. And with 48 of these bad boys, we can do this until the cows come home until, why, what do we have here? Why, it is a slice to the radial artery. That's no good. Yes, with any successful toy that comes out, there are bound to be some manufacturers that perhaps have relaxed quality control and safety concerns. If we actually cut one of these slap bracelets open, we can see how they work. Inside is a curved metal strip. This strip is thin and a little sharp. It won't cut you easily like this, but when these bracelets are triggered, the ends move in fast like a whip, and they can do some damage. Many of the cheaper versions of these bracelets were being worn and worn down by kids in class. After hundreds of slaps, the outer material would wear away, exposing the sharp metal strip inside. And soon enough, plenty of news stories started pouring in about kids getting cut by the slap bracelets in the middle of class. This led to many classrooms banning the bracelets as they were seen as a health risk to students. And many versions of the toy have even been recalled over the years, with the most recent case in the US happening in 2018. And seeing how this has been a reoccurring problem, I have a strange feeling that this is not going to be the last slap bracelet recall we'll ever see. Number 9. Fidget toys. Can you believe it's been 8 years since the height of the fidget toy phase? Fidget spinners, fidget cubes, fidget dodecahedrons, you name it, were a craze that spread more rampantly in 2017 than the virus that came 3 years later. But of course it was the spinner that was the true super spreader here. Fidget spinners are a simple contraption consisting of a central ball bearing encased in a plastic or metal housing. They are precisely weighted to be perfectly balanced so that when you give them a flick, they spin and keep spinning for a long time. And they're pretty satisfying actually, for about 10 minutes until you get bored of them and pick up a fidget cube. These are as advertised, a plastic cube with tactile switches and doohickeys on each face that allow you to stay stimulated anytime, anywhere, including the classroom. Fidget spinners and cubes became extremely popular in every grade level, and when kids of all ages come together to find joy in something so simple and seemingly harmless as these, you know that schools are going to strike down the ban hammer at some point. While it was argued that fidget toys helped many students focus, particularly those with forms of ADHD and autism, some teachers argued quite the opposite, believing that they were more of a distraction to the students than an aid. As a result, many teachers started to prohibit the use of fidget toys in classrooms. But because these toys were pretty harmless, unless you took the fidget spinners to an air compressor, it was only individual teachers banning the toys, and big school-wide bans were pretty uncommon. Some fidget toys were also a bit noisy, especially the fidget cubes, which was the biggest factor in a couple of my high school teachers banning them during class. They could be a bit of a nuisance at times, but they were never a serious hazard. Unlike Number 8. Clackers. Long before the newfangled spinners and whatnots, clackers were one of the earlier schoolyard fidget toys. Also known as kerbangers and many other nomenclature around the world, clackers were incredibly popular with students back in the late 60s and through the 70s. A set of clackers is comprised of 2 hard plastic balls connected via a string. A small handle or ring would be placed in the middle of the string for the user to hold onto and start clacking away. Classic legit clackers were made of a hard resin that gave a very satisfying clack sound when clacked together. Nowadays, these genuine sets are pretty pricey and often not sold for reasons we will discuss, so here I have ordered a more modern pipsqueak version to demonstrate. These are made of a much softer and lighter plastic, but they'll do the job. You first learn to clack like this. Simple, one clack at the bottom ictus here. Get a rhythm going. Then you can move into advanced clack double time now. This here is harder than it looks, and you need to make sure that you don't go too hard with the clacking, or else you may face the painful consequences.
And now, punch it!
Yes, now when you bring the clackers into the schoolyard and classroom, not only do they produce a lot of noise pollution, but they also produce a lot of injuries. Most common were bangs and bruises to the fingers and wrists when kids would try to increase their clacking speed. In fact, some sets of clackers even came with instructions insisting that the user don a protective rag around the wrist to prevent such injuries. But more troubling than this was the frequent failure of the toy's construction. These things would go through a lot of abuse and eventually started to break. Whether it was the string snapping and flinging the heavy clackers across the room into some kid's head, or the resin balls actually exploding on impact, causing sharp fragments to fly in all directions. If schools hadn't yet banned the toys for the racket they created, surely they would ban them once kids started to get hurt. And if the school still hadn't banned them, well, surely they'd have to, once the US government did. Yes, in the court case titled United States vs. article consisting of 50,000 cardboard boxes more or less each containing one pair of clacker balls, the federal government declared the clackers hazardous, and the government was given the go-ahead to seize and destroy a shipment of 50,000 clackers, more or less, intercepted in Wisconsin. The case came to a conclusion on May 21st, 1976, and while many sources online will say that the toy has been completely banned in the US and many other countries as a result of cases like this, the clacker controversy wasn't something as serious as, say, lawn darts. You can still buy new pairs today, albeit not from the original manufacturer that made the toy popular back in the day. And clackers have even begun to make a resurgence in the 2020s, particularly in the Philippines under the name Lato Lato, although most kids who practice today use the modern adaptation of the toy that I have here. And as a result, injuries and mishaps from the toy have become quite a bit less common. Number 7. Beyblade. Now this is preposterous. Beyblades? How could Beyblades have been banned from school? Well, if they were banned from your school, you probably know at least one reason why. Beyblades were invented in 1999 and were most popular up until the early 2010s, and they're actually still a pretty common hobby today. Beyblades come in two main parts. First is the actual Beyblade, which is like an upgraded spinning top. And then you have the launcher, which is used to launch the Beyblade into battle at high RPMs. Beyblade battles usually take place in bowl-shaped arenas, which I do not have, but I do have this big bowl with some mystery stains in it that should suffice. In Beyblade, you battle to see who is the strongest, or fastest, or mostly just the luckiest. By battling Beyblades in these bowl-shaped arenas, you maximize their interaction with each other and you are able to keep them contained. But sometimes their awesomeness cannot be contained and they can occasionally go out of bounds. And this is one reason some schools have prohibited Beyblades. Because a lot of Beyblades have metal components to them, they can do some damage when they come into contact with the skin or eyeballs or whatnot. They can cause some minor dings and scratches here and there, but you'd be hard-pressed to find a case where Beyblades have actually caused any serious injuries. Besides this, another reason why some schools have banned Beyblades is due to gambling. Yes, because the game of Beyblade revolves around battles that are largely down to chance, it is pretty much perfect for gambling. Some students bringing their Beyblades to school would bet things like snacks or lunch money or their Beyblade parts and accessories. And of course, when somebody loses a battle fair and square, well, we all know how some kids are sore losers. And some of these sore losers would complain, cry, rat out the entire Beyblade gambling operation to a teacher, and get Beyblades banned from school. Anyways, Beyblades, let it rip, but don't let teachers find another reason to ban them. Number 6. Tamagotchi. Tamagotchi are a Japanese invention released in Japan in 1996, and later to the US in 1997, followed by much of the rest of the world soon after. And within its first 2 years, over 40 million Tamagotchis had been sold. The name Tamagotchi roughly translates to egg watch in English. And they are in fact little plastic eggs, but they are not digital watches, they are instead digital pets. Each egg has one pet installed onto it. Mine here is a Star Wars partnership, so I have R2-D2. You interact with your pet through the small LCD display and these 3 buttons. And how often you interact with your pet is up to you. That is, if you don't care about your pet dying. Just like real pets, Tamagotchi are demanding, as they need to be fed, played with, and kept healthy at all times, or else they will genuinely die and be lost forever, forcing the owner to completely reset the game. This somewhat strict gameplay is where the biggest problems arose from. Kids would need to take their Tamagotchi to school and tend to them throughout class to keep them alive. This created a massive distraction to the students as well as the teachers, who would look out into the classroom and constantly see kids with their heads down in their device. Worse yet, if the student didn't care for the pet during class and it did die, they would be mentally ruined, as many kids were actually forming an emotional attachment to their Tamagotchi, and like mentioned, when they die, they are gone forever. This, coupled with the distraction the game was creating in class, led to several bans of the Tamagotchi in schools throughout Japan, the United States, Hong Kong, the Philippines, Thailand. Basically everywhere they were sold, school-wide bans were extremely common, and Tamagotchi bans were likely one contributing factor to their loss in popularity in the early to mid-2000s. Tamagotchi are still sold today, now in several variations ranging from the more classic to the more modern with full color screens. But Tamagotchi now are largely looked at as a thing of the past, and you'd be hard-pressed to find them in schools today since every student is already preoccupied with a smartphone. And in case you're wondering, why don't Tamagotchi have a pause function so that kids could just leave it at home while they went to class? Well, they did have a pause function, but most kids just didn't want to pause it, or just didn't know how to because they didn't feel like reading the instructions. I'm gonna be honest, neither did I. Number 5. Gel pens. Not every school fad is a trendy toy marketed towards kids. Gel pens are a great example of how such a simple commodity can become so sought after by students and so hated by teachers. The original and most popular gel pens are called jelly rolls. They were invented and released in Japan in the late 1980s and were quickly brought to the US and other countries with a variety of colors. And I got the fancy ones. These here even have glitter in them. You can of course use gel pens to write on paper, but as many kids discovered, the special non-toxic formula that makes up the ink in gel pens is also perfect for drawing on skin. This is what caused gel pens to explode in popularity, as many kids began constantly drawing designs and writing notes on themselves and each other. Every classroom was pretty much turned into a tattoo parlor, and unlike normal ballpoint pens, the water-based ink in jelly rolls and other gel pens was pretty easy to wash off. So they seem like harmless fun, but we are in class and harmless fun is not acceptable here. Of course, one reason why gel pens began to be banned by teachers was due to distractions created as kids were spending more time drawing on themselves than actually putting pen to paper. And when they did put pen to paper, many teachers were not a fan of how the special gel ink formula performed, as it had a tendency to smear and rub away. Also concerning was the fact that although jelly rolls are marketed as non-toxic, at the height of their popularity in the late 90s and early 2000s, they were not approved by the FDA. And the company that manufactured the pens made an effort to never recommend or market the fact that the gel pens work well on skin. But of course, what kid cares about the FDA? Certainly not the ones who started sucking on the pens to turn their tongues fun colors. Yes, I'm not sure if this was just my elementary school, but when kids heard the words non-toxic water-based ink, it was pretty much an invitation to start drinking the stuff to temporarily tattoo their tongues. This was obviously a problem, and my teachers had an eagle eye out for anyone sucking on gel pens. Although jelly rolls and other gel pens are still manufactured today and beloved for their smooth writing, the gel pen tattooing craze largely died out in the early 2010s. And instead of sucking on gel pens, kids nowadays just suck on dab pens and actual drugs, so I kind of think we've gone a step backwards here. Number 4. Silly bands. Alright, let's keep them coming. What's up next? It is silly bands. What are they? Rubber bands. Simple, harmless rubber band bracelets in the shape of animals. Aren't they cute? You can wear them around your wrist as a fashion statement. There is no possible way these could have been banned from anywhere. Released in the US in 2008, and debatedly a stolen idea from another group of inventors in Japan, which is a whole nother story, silly bands were most popular among grade school students in the early 2010s. They are silicone rubber band-like bracelets that come in many shapes, from your favorite animals to your favorite cartoon characters to your favorite Angry Birds. Basically, if something was popular in the early 2010s, there was probably a silly bands collaboration with it. But here we are just going to take a look at a dinosaur variety pack, because dinosaurs are pretty cool. Silly bands were sold in stores most commonly in packs of 12 or 24, like I have here. These 24 packs would run for about $5, which made collecting mass amounts of silly bands fairly doable for any kid who received a allowance or who just begged their parents hard enough for them.
Hey guys, this is my silly bands collection.
These things used to be everywhere in the classroom, but if you weren't in grade school when these things were popular, you may not know the two main reasons why such simple little things became so problematic. The most common reason why several teachers decided to ban silly bands in class was due to distractions they created as a result of kids trading the bands in the middle of class. As mentioned, silly bands have been made in collaboration with a variety of entertainment giants, but select series could have been hard to find in local stores. If a kid had their heart set on acquiring, say, SpongeBob bands, but they were all sold out in the local shops, they would instead head to school, keeping their eye out for any classmates that had them, and then they could offer to trade. If they did trade, they would often do so during class, trying to stay as quiet and cool as possible so as not to get caught by the teacher. But because silly bands were such a huge deal, pretty much the entire class would be trading bracelets around, and it became a bit of a distraction. But also distracting were the kids who would wear so many silly bands at a time that they began to cut off circulation. Yes sir, the second reason for silly bands, as we're going to call them here, were kids wearing dozens of them at one time, causing them to lose blood supply to their hands, and there are even stories out there of significant injuries caused as a result of excess silly banding. And here we were thinking no harm could possibly come of something so simple, from elaborate trading networks in class to cutting off circulation. How could this possibly get any worse? Number 3. Smarties. Now there are a couple different varieties of Smarties candies around the world, so just to be clear here, we are talking about these Smarties. These Smarties are basically just tiny little pucks of compressed sugar that come in different colors, and apparently they're all different flavors too, but I've never been able to tell a difference. But the flavors don't matter here because we're not using these Smarties for snacking, we're instead using them for smoking.
On this morning's Health Watch, a new fad, smoking Smarties.
A even bigger epidemic than kids sucking on gel pens, or goofballs sucking on crushed up packs of Smarties and blowing them out to emulate cigarette smoke. This trend became most popular in the late 2000s when kids discovered that if they took a pack of Smarties and crushed up the pieces within the wrapper, the candy would break down into a fine powder. This powder could then be sucked into the mouth and then blown back out, and all of a sudden, you could give the impression that you were smoking or vaping in the middle of class. Doesn't this just look so cool? Again, nowadays I'm pretty sure kids just do real drugs in the middle of class, but that's besides the point. The mechanism behind smoking Smarties is supposed to be entirely cosmetic. You're not actually supposed to inhale the sugar dust, just suck it into your cheeks and blow it back out for the visual smoking effect. But this fact did not matter to the teachers and entire schools that began banning Smarties on school grounds entirely. An obvious reason for the bans is that, even though the kids aren't actually smoking any illicit substances when they are smoking Smarties, it kinda looks like they are, and it is probably not a good look for a school when half of the students look like they are trying to hotbox the classroom. There is even an extreme case where a school went as far to suspend a student for 12 days and classify his Smarties under the school's drug and alcohol policy. Along with this, another reason for banning the candy is the fact that although you are not supposed to inhale the Smarties into your throat or lungs, as we discussed, even when using the proper technique, kids would always inhale a little bit of the sugar involuntarily, which caused many throat and respiratory problems. But smoking Smarties didn't cause as many problems as the trend's successor, snorting Smarties. There's no sugarcoating this one, it is exactly what it sounds like. In fact, the only thing getting sugar-coated when you snort Smarties is your entire olfactory system. Number 2. Pogs. Pogs were made popular back in the early 1990s and just may have been the largest and most rampant school fad of all time.
In 1995, we'll do in excess of $100 million in Pog.
Here's a quick rundown for anyone unfamiliar. Pogs is just a popular name for a game known as Milk Caps. In this game you have these little cardboard discs which most people just call Pogs, and you have a couple of heavier discs, usually made out of metal, known as slammers. The cardboard Pogs were made in collaboration with just about every popular product, TV show, and video game throughout the 90s, which helped the things explode in popularity as a collector's item. And many kids valued their special Pogs in their collection, and they would have hated to lose them. In playing the game of Pogs, you need at least 2 people. Each player supplies a stack of their own Pogs, and you combine them into one. Each player takes turns throwing the slammer disc at the stack, and taking the Pogs that flip over. The player with the most Pogs in the end of the game wins, and if you're playing for keeps, you also win all of the Pogs you collected, while the other player walks away with their stack. And if you think back to our Beyblade discussion, you may be able to guess why the game was seen as problematic. Schools were the most popular place to play Pogs, and because they were cheap to collect, just about everyone was playing. And in schools, many a fit and fist was thrown by kids playing the game for keeps and losing all their favorite Pogs to their opponents. And many teachers who noticed this began classifying the game as, yes, gambling. And in the mid-90s, Pogs quickly became one of the most banned items. And because the school was the most popular spot to play the game, school bans caused the Pogs to largely be phased out by the late 90s. And then kids who stopped collecting colorful cardboard discs then had to move on to another fad. Collecting colorful cardboard cards. Pokemon jump scare here. You thought we'd get through this list without talking about it. Pokemon cards were released in 1996 as Pogs kind of began to be phased out. And these two exploded in popularity among kids as well as school boards who also wanted them banned along with Pogs.
We do not bring Pokemon cards to school. Remember that please fellas, because if you do, they will be taken and given back to you at the end of the day to take home, not to reappear.
We are looking at the Pokemon trading card game, and the trading aspect is what most schools had a problem with. Pokemon cards became instantly collectible, and many of the more rare cards were very sought after by students. This resulted in kids trading not only their own Pokemon cards to get certain rare ones, but they were also trading more valuable things, like in this case where a kid traded 3 Game Boy games for a single Pokemon card back in the year 2000. And at $50 a piece, those Game Boy games were pretty valuable. And when this kid's mom found out that he traded them all for a single card, she took the card away along with all of his other Pokemon stuff. I wonder what card it was. Number 1. Heelys. Heelys are the greatest thing mankind has ever created. Released 2,000 years after the birth of Christ, these things were debatedly more worshipped for a good few years. Upon first impression, Heelys just look like any normal shoe, but when you flip them over, you discover a plug. You can use this included tool here to release said plug and replace it with the included skate wheel, and then you have the greatest and possibly most dangerous fad of the mid-2000s. Although Heelys were originally released in the year 2000, they didn't really see their largest spike in popularity until about 2006. These Heelys commercials from the time made the shoes look awesome, and they were pretty awesome for any kid who could actually convince their parents to buy them. But while these commercials show kids ripping some sick tricks outdoors with helmets and elbow pads and whatnot, this was not the intention of the average customer. You see, the cool thing about Heelys was the fact that you could wear them to school like normal shoes, but if you had the wheels sneakily installed, you could instantly take your hallway commuting into sport mode. Obviously, this became a bit of a problem, especially once the shoes really started to sell and get popular, and suddenly kids everywhere were ripping it through the school hallways. This resulted in many students tripping at high rates of speed, often injuring themselves and others on the way down. And by the late 2000s, pretty much every school had some sort of ban or limitation on the shoes. Some schools just banned the use of Heelys indoors, requiring students to remove the wheels until they left the building for recess. Other schools banned the skating function of Heelys on school grounds entirely, since just because students were outside, it didn't mean that they couldn't get injured, and school nurses' offices were kind of reaching full capacity just about every day. Heelys are actually still sold today in both kids and adult sizes, but their popularity largely died off in the early 2010s. This was certainly in part due to the hefty school bans, but also because, well, Heelys were not just an easy plug-and-play toy like a lot of kids were kind of led to believe. When you got your first pair of Heelys, you really had to put in the practice to learn how to Heely properly and stay stable. A lot of kids, especially younger ones, just weren't up to the challenge of learning, and just one really bad fall can turn a kid away from Heelys for good. I remember when I had Heelys, one incident that occurred whilst trying to bomb the driveway at my childhood home. After getting some speed, I tripped over some cracks in the cement, scraped all of the skin off my knee, and spilled so much blood into my Heelys that my mom just took them and threw them in the garbage right on the spot. And like many kids who saw similar tragedies, this was the last time I ever wore Heelys. Until today, when I decided to come back for revenge. Okay, here we go. Ignore those noises. Okay, here I am just doing a little warm-up here, getting the neurons firing, trying to remember how to use these things. It's not handling the bumps too well. And after a good 45 seconds, I'm feeling pretty confident, and I'm ready to bomb this steep sidewalk. This is even steeper than the driveway that claimed my knee, so let's see what happens. Whoa. That's pretty cool.